Chapter 4. It has to be Brandt, Sophie whispered as she watched the firemen rush around the Piazza della Signoria. They'd ignored the shopkeeper's warnings, using their obscure to slip past the police blockades. The fire hadn't killed anyone, and it had been extinguished before it spread to other buildings. But the famous Palazzo Vecchio's stone walls were blackened and crumbling, and the clock tower was leaning more than the Tower of Pisa. The crowds behind them were crying, and Sophie understood their grief. She'd felt the same way the day she watched the elves' capital of Eternalia consumed by Everblaze. That wasn't the building we needed, was it? Fitz asked, as they jumped out of the way of two firemen. I thought the entrance to the corridor was in the same place with a weird name. The Uffizi, Sophie agreed, pointing to the arched building next to the ruined palace. But the police have closed all of the landmarks, and an obscure won't fool sensors and alarms. Well, I don't think we should stay here, Fitz said. The Neverseen could be watching. How do you know it's them? Dex asked. Don't humans have fires all the time? Can you smell it? Sophie asked. Keith sniffed the air. It smells like burned sugar. Exactly. I should have recognized it earlier. That's how San Diego fires smell. And Brandt said those. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to spot a figure in a hooded black cloak. But how could it be him? Dex asked. He was super messed up when he fled to the ogres. He'd lost a hand and, like, most of his face. Sophie shuddered, trying not to picture Brandt's bloody, blistered skin. He hadn't been able to walk on his own, couldn't even reach for his pathfinder. He'd forced her to get it for him as part of their deal to save her friends. He survived Jolie's fire, she said, remembering Brandt's old scars. She hoped a few of them were left. He deserved to be reminded of the life he destroyed. Or maybe the Black Swan set the fire themselves, Dex suggested, to hide from the council or something. Do they have any pyrokinetics? Biana asked. I hope not, Sophie said. But even if they do, why would they burn the place they instructed us to go? Because this place wasn't part of their instructions, Fitz reminded her. This is the building next door. But it still makes it 10 times harder for us to get to them, Sophie said. You guys are really totally ignoring the much more important question, Keith interrupted. He pointed across the courtyard to a withered marble statue. Am I the only one who's noticed that dude is naked? Sophie rolled her eyes. That's the David. I don't care what his name is, Keith said. I still don't want to see his stuff. I'm with Keith on this one, Dex jumped in. Me too, Biana agreed, blushing bright pink. Yeah, why isn't he wearing clothes? Fitz asked, looking anywhere but at the statue. Because it's art, Sophie said. Most of the old painters and sculptors did nudes. They were studying the human body or something. I don't know. Why are we even talking about this? You're right, Fitz said. We need a plan. Personally, I think we should keep following the Black Swan's clues. Once we get into that corridor, I bet the rest of their instructions will all make sense. We just need to figure out how to get past security, and I'm on it, Dex said, heading toward the Uffizi. Fitz grabbed his arm. We all have to walk together to stay in the range of the obscure. Dex muttered something about power trips as Fitz took the lead. They wove carefully around all the firemen and reporters, reaching the entrance of the museum without bumping anyone. Dex pressed his palms against the stone facade. You're right about the crazy security, Sophie. Can you disable it? Biana asked. Only temporarily. But do we get to this corridor thing? How do we get to this whole corridor thing? On the upper floor, through a plain unmarked door, Sophie could see it perfectly in her mind, which felt strange since she'd never been there. Okay, I can buy us some time, Dex said, but I'm going to have to ruin the obscure. Is that the only way? Fitz asked. No, I thought it'd be fun to make things extra hard and dangerous. Hey, Sophie said, stepping between them. No time for fighting. Dex glowered at Fitz as he went back to work, twisting the obscure apart and tinkering with the gears. He pulled out several cogs and springs and shoved them into his pocket before closing it back up. Here, Wonder Boy, catch! Fitz caught it with his mind. Telekinesis. It was an elven skill Sophie rarely used, thanks to an epic splotching match, where she'd accidentally flung Fitz into a wall. But Fitz clearly didn't share her reservations. He spun the obscure a few times, probably to annoy Dex, and then dropped the gadget into his hand. As soon as I opened the door, Dex told Fitz, roll that in. Then we run. Everyone ready? Dex didn't bother waiting for a reply before he tapped his fingertips against the lock and the door clicked open. Now! Fitz bowled the obscure into the museum and it streaked across the floor, blaring white noise and blinding everyone with a flash. How are we supposed to see where we're going? Sophie asked as Dex pulled her into the museum. We aren't, Dex said, but no one can see us either. Ow, I just hit my shoulder, Bianca cried. Maybe it was on another naked statue, Keith suggested. Ew, what if it was? Will you two be quiet? Fitz yelled. Everyone, follow my voice. I found the stairs. They climbed to the second floor where the light was slightly less blinding. Which way? Fitz asked. I think we're supposed to go west, Sophie said. Everyone, look for a green room and a plain wooden doorway. They walked by it at first, but Bianca doubled the back and called them over. Fitz rattled the locked doors until Dex pushed him inside. Leave this to the experts. Several agonizing seconds passed. Any time now, Fitz said. Sorry, this lock makes no sense. Wait, I got it! They raced into the corridor and Dex flicked on the lights before turning to latch the doors behind them. Wow, this place is huge, Sophie whispered as they climbed the grand stairway. She'd been expecting a dark, cramped hall, but this really was the path of the privileged. The entrance ceiling was gilded and decorated with frescoes, and the walls were covered in priceless paintings. Better hurry, Dex said, running to catch up with them. The tweaks I did to the lock won't last. Plus, I can feel cameras, and it would waste too much time trying to deal with them. Subscure and Flash might have fried their circuits, but it's better to keep your head down, and let's get cracking on that next clue. Wasn't it the one with the blood? Bian asked. If it was, think it has anything to do with this? They stopped in front of a cluster of portraits that looked like they'd been burned and pieced back together. No. Those paintings were destroyed during a terrorist attack back in the 90s, Sophie whispered. I can't imagine the Black Swan would ever call that blood turned precious. Bianca shuddered. Humans are so awful to each other. Didn't a pyrokinetic elf just burn another building earlier today? Keith asked. Are you saying elves are as bad as humans? Bianca asked. I'm saying we're not as different as we should be, certain elves especially. The bitterness in his voice made it clear he meant his mom. Come on, let's keep moving, Sophie said, then realized they were forgetting a clue. Before the blood turned precious, they needed eyes that watch eternal. Could it mean the portrait staring at them? That didn't feel right. Then she spotted a bared round window. Is this the one you saw in your memory? Fitz asked. It's hard to tell. The scene in my head was from the other side of the wall, but I just remembered that these windows were called Cosimo's eyes. They were his way of keeping watch as he walked through the city. That's the next clue. Great, so now the blood part is next? Bjorn asked with a grimace. Actually, I think I know what that means, and it's not as bad as you're thinking. Sophie confirmed it a few minutes later when they reached a row of wide panorama side windows. Yep, we're on the Ponte Vecchio now. There are a bunch of gold shops lining the bridge underneath us, but they used to be butchers. The medics didn't like the smell, so they moved the golden merchants here. Bianca gagged. I still can't believe humans eat animals. Did you do that, Sophie? Hey, check out this view. Keith said, saving Sophie from having to answer. I'll give humans this. They make their own kind of beauty, even if that river looks pretty brown. The Arno River definitely wasn't an inviting color, but it was lined on each side by pastel buildings, many with terraces and window boxes like a scene from a painting. But the panoramic view also reminded Sophie of another less than awesome human fact. The window they were looking through had been added for Adolf Hitler. He'd probably stood right where they were. Let's go, Sophie said, needing to get away from the evil in the air. The elves might have done some terrible things over time, but she doubted they could ever match human monsters like Hitler. We must be getting close to the next clue, she said, trying to stay focused. Anyone see a tower? I'm guessing it's part of the corridor somehow. What do you think they mean about it not yielding? Fitz said as the corridor made a sharp turn. Then another and another. Sophie stopped. I think we're here. Vasari tore down pretty much anything in his way when he built this corridor. But there was a family named the Manellis who refused to let their building be knocked down, so Vasari detoured the corridor around it. And I think that's what we just did. Keith smirked. Look who knows all the things. Sophie looked away, having to wonder if her memories were hers made her wish she could scrub her brain. The clue says that this is where we'd find the next steps in our journey, Fitz said. Everyone spread out and look for the sign of the swan. They combed the walls, the floor, the ceiling. Sophie was starting to worry. She'd guessed the clue wrong when she realized a long scratch under her feet had a very distinctive curve. Over here, she called, tracing her fingers along the mark. The curve deviated form. It's designed to make a full circle, but she could tell it was the sign of the swan. I feel a latch, Dex said, pressing his palm against the floor. He twisted his hand a few times, miming turning a doorknob, and a quiet click made the floor drop away. They stared at the rusty ladder leaning down into the misty darkness. Okay, so who wants to climb down into that scary pit of doom first? Keith asked. I'll go, Sophie said. Nope, Fitz told her. You've almost died enough times. Time to let me take a turn. Or you could just be careful, Sophie said. He flashed his perfect smile. That works too. He slipped on one leg into the opening, testing his weight on the rung, before stepping into the ladder. Once I see what's at the bottom, I'll let you know if it's safe. He stepped down another rug, then another. The darkness swallowed him on the next step, and Sophie kept one hand poised on the ladder, ready to rush down at the first sound of danger. After an agonizingly long time, Fitz shouted, All clear! Yes, another voice called, one Sophie would have recognized, even if he hadn't started the next sentence with his favorite expression. You kids took your sweet time getting here. The end.